It's 6 p.m. Cairo local time, and it's time for the English News Bulletin on Channel 2. This is Sahar Tolawi, starting up with the main headlines of the day. President Sisi arrives in Saudi Arabia to hold the summit talks with Saudi Crown Prince at the start of an official visit. Prime Minister Madbouli meets senior officials and businessmen as part of his current visit to Japan. And Egypt warns against the repercussions of Israel's expansionist moves in the occupied Palestinian territories. Welcome back. The news in full. President Sisi was received today Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Abd al-Aziz Al Saud upon his arrival in the Saudi city of Liyum at the start of an official visit to Saudi Arabia. The visit comes upon an initiative by the Saudi Crown Prince where they hold summit talks on the latest regional developments, in front of which is the genocide war in Gaza, in addition to the situations in Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Sudan and Yemen, along with the Red Sea security. The visit comes in the framework of the deeply rooted historic ties binding the two nations. And as part of his current visit to Yokohama, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli held a series of meetings with the senior Japanese officials and the businessmen on boosting bilateral ties and cooperation, particularly on the economic front. On behalf of President Sisi, the Prime Minister has taken part in the 9th Tokyo International Conference for African Development, ICAD, in the Japanese city of Yokohama. Details in the coming report.
Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli met Japanese Minister of Land, Infrastructure, Tourism and Transport, Hiromasa Nakano, on the sidelines of his participation in the 9th session of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development ICAD 9, hosted by Yokohama, Japan. During the meeting, the Prime Minister stressed the significance of the Egyptian-Japanese cooperation in the field of infrastructure, which is a priority among the numerous national projects implemented in Egypt. Prime Minister Madbouli, who is attending the meetings of ICAD 9 on behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, also met President of the Executive Director of the Japan External Trade Organization, JETRO. Madbouli praised the growing cooperation between both countries in the fields of infrastructure, renewable energy and health. For his part, JETRO President said he is seeking broader trade exchange with Egypt as well as increasing Egyptian companies in the Japanese market and welcomed the Egyptian commodities. Also, in light of the distinguished ties between Egypt and Japan, the Prime Minister met with the Governor of Japan Bank for International Cooperation, JBIC. The meeting touched on means of enhancing ties between Egypt and the JBIC, particularly financing projects, on top of which the renewable energy field. The Prime Minister highlighted the available opportunities to establish a Japanese industrial zone in Egypt in the Suez Canal Economic Zone, in addition to the incentives provided to investors in Egypt. For his part, the JBIC governor hailed the presence of the Japanese corporations in the Egyptian market.
And still with the Prime Minister's activities in Japan, where he met the chief of the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA, stressing the promoted level of the bilateral ties in different fields, including the health, culture, education, infrastructure, and transport. Madbouli pointed out to the notable cooperation in the education field through the establishment of 69 Japanese schools in Egypt, saying he hopes for increased Japanese investments in Egypt lands. The Prime Minister also added that he was looking forward to the top Japanese officials' participation in the inaugural ceremony of the Grand Egyptian Museum. And in the meantime, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli also held a meeting with the executive manager of the Tokyo Tosho Corporation and invited him to pump up more investments in the Suez Canal Economic Zone, making the use of incentives. The Prime Minister pointed out that Egypt's membership in many economic blocs worldwide as helping to facilitate the access of the corporation's products to global markets. Madbouli also hailed the long cooperation binding Egypt with Japanese giant, having extended for more than 90 years, saying that he was looking forward to inking a cooperation memoranda in the technical education field in the near future. And also Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli today attended a dinner banquet held by the Japanese Prime Minister for the delegations participating in the 9th Tokyo International Conference for African Development ICAD. Ishiba welcomed the guests and expressed happiness over the successful outcomes that the conference is showing so far. And at the banquet, Madbouli has been keen to discuss with the attendees a number of important cooperation files. And the Minister of Planning and Economic Development and International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashar, reviewed with Japanese State Minister for Foreign Affairs the progress in the strategic economic ties between the two countries. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, where Dr. Rania Al-Mashar stressed the government's keen interest in enhancing partnership with Japanese institutions and in diversifying cooperation in the trade exchange field. And both sides expressed the readiness to open new horizons of the partnership between Egypt and Japanese private sector companies to pave the way for the implementation of the joint projects. And the Minister of Education and Vocational Training, Mohammed Abdul Latif, today lauded as a distinguished role model in the Egyptian-Japanese cooperation in developing education in Egypt. The minister made these remarks in the meeting with Japan's State Minister for Foreign Affairs in boosting cooperation in the school education field, pointing out to the fruitful partnership with the Japanese educational institutions. And he asserted his minister's keenness to benefit from the successful Japanese experience, particularly in the technical education, technology and the human resources fields, copying with the Egyptian vision to enhance the citizens' capabilities. And to the Minister of Foreign Immigration and Egyptian expatriates, Badr Abdelati held a series of phone calls with African counterparts from Sudan to South Sudan, Djibouti, Uganda, Kenya and Somalia. The talks touched on boosting bilateral ties, particularly in the economic, trade and investment fields, via different cooperation mechanisms. And the phone talks also focused on African issues of the mutual concern and efforts for enhancing the joint stability of the continent and achieve the developed aspirations of its peoples. On the water file, Egypt's top diplomat highlighted that water security is an existential cause and stressed the necessity of obedience by international laws pertaining to the management of joint water resources. And to Egypt said that it was following up with the deep concern the Israeli government moves to control and seize the cities in the Gaza Strip as part of its continued pursuits to consolidate its illegitimate occupation of the Palestinian territories in the flagrant violation of the international law and the humanitarian law. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt voiced the strong condemnation of the Israeli exilatory policies and expansionist moves for occupying the West Bank and Gaza, and the occupation side's ongoing plans to displace Palestinians from the lands, which reflects total disregard for mediation efforts and the proposed deal to secure a ceasefire. Egypt also warned that the approach of oppressive power and the persistent breach of international law will lead to further escalation and negative consequences on the regional and international peace and security. The statement called on the international community and the UN Security Council to immediately intervene to stop the war in Gaza and safeguard its people from further deterioration in their humanitarian conditions. And also still with the Gaza, while the Israeli occupation forces maintained its pressure on Gaza City with heavy bombardments, with reports saying 19 Palestinians were martyred, including 9 waiting at aid distribution site. Despite international condemnation, the occupation troops conducted heavy shelling over many villages in the Gaza City, in addition to an escalation in the north, aiming to impose total control on all the cities in the northern sector. And the occupation forces also bombarded the central Gaza Strip and Khan Yunis, including aid distribution points. The UN and the aid groups said that the newly approved plans to seize the Gaza City sparked international condemnation, deepening fears that the plan will worsen the already catastrophic humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. And in line with the presidential directives support the Palestinian people, relief and the humanitarian aid, the trucks began moving from Egypt toward Gaza through Rafah border crossing towards the Karam Abu Salem crossing. The trucks are carrying 2,000 tons of food and medical supplies offered by Egyptian Red Crescent. And meanwhile, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called today for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza after the Israeli occupation troops announced that the first steps of an operation to take over in Gaza City. Guterres said in Japan, where he is attending the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, that it's vital to reach immediately a ceasefire in Gaza to avoid the death and the destruction. Guterres also called for the unconditional release of the hostages. He also urged the Israeli Occupation Authority to reverse a decision to expand the legal settlement construction in the West Bank. And now to the world of business, where Egypt bourse turned lower at the close of the weekend. The transactions amid sell-offs by Arab and foreign investment funds against purchases by the local investor and corporation. The market capital of the listed companies lost some £5 billion to reach 2.4 trillion Egyptian pounds amid an average trading of 20.6 billion Egyptian pounds. The benchmark index EGX 30 dipped 0.31% above 35,000 point mark, and the equal weighted indices EGX 70 and EGX 100 fell 0.23% and 0.29% respectively. And too, the oil prices rose again today following a report that the previous day showing a sharp decline in the U.S. crude stockpiles. West Texas intermediated 0.8% at $63.20 per barrel, and the Brent North Sea crude was also up to 0.7% at $67.29 per barrel. And by this we come to the end of our English News Bulletin on Channel 2. Thank you for watching. That's all for now. This is Sahar Talawi.